Good afternoon, everybody. It's Chris Hall here, and welcome to another Charity Digital Remote Webinar Day. Thank you for joining us today, and I do hope you're all keeping very well and enjoying the sunshine. Well, we're far from out of the COVID woods just yet. It does seem to us here at Charity Digital that the sector has somewhat settled. You know, every day now we're hearing from charities who are continuing to adapt to digital and how they're not just surviving, but actually thriving in it as well. And we've been collecting your stories for the past few weeks, and we've partnered with Cast and the Catalyst to start sharing those within our charity networks. You can check out some of the great stuff other organisations are doing on our COVID-19 hub. We'll be running these stories through June, so if you have your own story, do feel free to get in touch with us and share it with us, and we'll add it in to the mix. On Tuesday, we released a fundraising podcast with Just Giving and children's care charity Become, who are actually one of our success stories that we were just talking about. In that, we talked in detail of how fundraising has changed in isolation. You know, that digital has elevated a lot of organisations' fundraising initiatives and has actually brought them even closer to their donors. And today we're looking to build on the nuances of that discussion. We have a popular returning guest today, and Nigel Taylor, who's Senior Solutions Consultant at Acquia. And he's going to showcase some of the great virtual fundraising initiatives from all walks of the sector before deep diving into how charities can use personalisation and marketing automation to promote outreach activities, drive fundraising campaigns, and more importantly, make sure you're being heard in the meanwhile. Before I hand over, the usual housekeeping rules do apply. So, of course, please be kind to us and record and forgiveness. We are doing this fully remotely, and to be completely transparent, we have faced some technical issues already this morning. We do feel we have fixed those, but if it does drop out, we will be with you as soon as possible. We have the things in place to make sure we're back online as soon as possible. We will, as always, be running a Q&A at the end of the session. If you want to add or submit a question, you can do so by hitting the Q&A button in the middle of your screen and sending it straight through to us. I'll be quizzing Nigel on those at the end. And as always, the same as every week, we will be sending out a copy of the recording and the slides and any other key resources that were mentioned in the next week or so. So stay close to your emails there. That's enough from me for now. I'd love to hand you over to Nigel. Welcome back, Nigel. It's really good to have you back.
Yes, Chris. Very much appreciated, mate. Thank you. So, hello, everybody, on this absolutely glorious day. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Adopting Digital Experiences to Boost Your Virtual Fundraising. I promise I will share my video later, but I am working with a 4G connection, therefore I'm going to save that while the slides are on. We're going to focus in on how our world has changed very recently and how we must all adapt to the current landscape. But let's be honest up front, everyone on this call is using digital in some way. But in these unprecedented times, digital for many is now the only route for providing their charitable services, and vitally, of course, for fundraising. So it's imperative that you maximize your efforts in this area. This session is aimed at those of you who are responsible for your organization's public campaigns, or if you work within marketing or IT, and who have been tasked with transitioning your fundraising and services efforts to digital. So we've got a lot to get through today. The primary focus of the webinar is, once you have established your fundraising and services strategies using digital, how then to engage donors and create targeted, personalized outreach that maximizes your efforts, and how the current outreach methods, including email and social media, can be leveraged to create more meaningful engagement. So my name's Nigel Taylor. I've been working in and around information systems for the last 21 years, and might even be 22 now, in both the United States and Europe. And I've worked from the development, design and coding through to the sales, consultation and implementation of all kinds of different solutions. But in the last few years, I was part of a large marketing team using the types of tools discussed today to deliver on branding, positioning and customer acquisition. So I'm currently a solutions consultant at Acquia. Acquia is the open source digital experience company, and it empowers the world's most ambitious brands to embrace innovation and create customer moments that matter. And our CTO was the guy who created Drupal, which is the open source content management system that now powers more than 4,000 organizations who are using Acquia solutions for hosting, content, community, and commerce. So with open source, you own your own digital roadmap and IP. So therefore, Drupal has a large community base, which means faster innovation, secure software, and reduced costs. And we're a market leader for CMS, having placed as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for 6 years in a row. And this year, in fact, we were placed as a leader for digital experience as well. We're also described by Forrester as scoring the highest for strategy, deployment, configuration, and scalability. Over the next 35 to 40 minutes, we're going to be taking a look at the current situation. So I'm sure we don't really need to spend that long on this because I think we all understand where we are. But we will take a look at how some charities are adapting, and in particular, those charities who we commonly associate with physical services, and how they are, in many ways, embracing digital as a replacement for the physical world. We're also going to discuss how fundraising efforts are adapting, with many charities purely reliant on outdoor events, or will see the majority of their donations given during a single event. The switch to digital is a critical effort aimed at balancing this new donation deficit. We're also going to be examining how donation channels are changing. Some of you will be aware of these new models, but for those of you that aren't, it's worth looking at how these channels can be leveraged. After that, we're going to look at how we can what we can expect, going forward. With so many different views and opinions being shared at the moment, even contradictory scientific ones. So, what logical, practical assumptions can we make about the year ahead? And ultimately, how can we pivot our digital strategies? And then finally, we're going to explore 3 simple personalization tactics that will help you engage your audience. Primarily, we will be looking at outreach to promote your activities, but how can we optimize this outbound communication and advertising without first examining inbound interactions? So in a time where donors are likely to be inundated with information and requests, how can your charity stand apart from the crowd? So before we start, I'd like to mention everybody will receive a complimentary copy of this presentation in a PDF format. It will also be available for download on the Charity Digital website or directly from acquia.com/webinars. And we're going to reserve time, as Chris mentioned, at the end for questions. But we've got several hundred registrants for today's webinar. So if you do not have your question answered, just submit them and I'll answer as many as I can individually at a later date. So here is the cold, hard reality of today. The COVID-19 pandemic has locked down normality as we know and understand it. And, I'm not trying to be dramatic here. It is just a fact. So those charities who have a physical presence on the high street or rely on visitors to their physical sites have been most effective. However, nearly all charities have had to furlough staff in one way or another. And the lockdown really has forged a schism. The complete shutdown of activities has created a predicted 4.3 billion donation gap. And even if the end, as we see it, is in sight, it's blurred and it's distant. So that's the bad news. And to be fair, I think you knew this already. So the real question is what comes next? What are charities doing to adapt? And how can we maximize our outreach to bridge this gap? So I think everyone is now familiar with Captain, in fact, now Colonel and soon to be knighted Tom Moore. His heartfelt efforts to raise funding for NHS charities were so widely received that he managed to raise over £33 million. Now, of course, Colonel Tom's efforts were picked up by the national media, and that daily exposure helped him to reach this amazing figure. But of course, there are other daily efforts going on by everyday people and each of them just trying to do their bit, each of them raising anything from a few hundred to thousands of pounds. And what is important here for me is the desire. So not only are there people out there who will find it in themselves to help through action, but there are also many, many people who want to help through donation. So for any charity, even now, in fact, probably especially now, raising awareness of your good work in your communities is vital, and based on this, will be well received by the public. And I wanted to highlight here, it's not just the big charities who can survive this situation. It's widely recognised that smaller charities will struggle. Therefore, a number of initiatives have been created. National Emergencies Trust, been around for a while, but it works with charities and other bodies to raise and distribute money to support victims at the time of this domestic crisis. It's chaired by Lord Dannatt, and it has the Duke of Cambridge as their patron, and they work with local charities and distribution partners to ensure that financial support is delivered to those that need it the most. Also, the National Lottery Community Fund distributes over 600 million a year to communities across the UK, and that's raised by players of the National Lottery. In April of this year, the Chancellor provided £750 million of coronavirus funding for frontline charities, 370 million of which was designated for smaller charities, including through a grant to the National Lottery Community Fund. So they're prioritising funding for organisations supporting communities through the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you haven't thought about syndicating yourself with these larger organisations, you know, if you're a smaller charity, you're not alone here. So what are charities doing to cope? As I mentioned before, all charities are digital in some way, but the complete removal of physical activities has shown that some charities have embraced the change in a comprehensive and innovative way. And they've moved to providing or even enhancing their services online. And these are a few standouts for me. So each of these charities, as you would understand them normally, rely almost entirely on providing physical services. So the Scouts, Save the Children, Water Aid, but each of them has immediately adapted to the current situation. As the Scouts say, they love the great outdoors. So they've pulled together indoor activity ideas to keep kids entertained while schools are closed to the coronavirus. And they've done that under the Great Indoors hashtag. Save the Children have taken a similar vein. They're tweeting regular tips and advice for parents to keep children entertained, occupied and stress-free. In Bangladesh, Water Aid are promoting hand washing using social media. And in Tanzania, they're supporting the government there to disseminate messages around hand hygiene through a combined radio, television and social media campaign. And in Pakistan, their digital awareness campaign reached over 22 million people. So for me, perhaps the most striking of these is the big issues move from street selling to inside and online. Now, if you know anything about these guys, they're very much about street selling. So for the first time in their history, they've moved the magazine to being sold in stores, which is one move. But they've also tried to find new ways to support their vendors. So through the crisis, they launched the Big Issue app. And the app gives readers a platform to access the weekly publication, as well as access to the Big Community, which is a channel focused on the people and businesses coming together in this crisis to support the most vulnerable in society. The efforts to raise funds has also moved to digital as the primary channel. So a number of charities gain a significant amount of donations during live events. And I think Glastonbury, in fact, is a primary example of this. So with events like these cancelled, the need to maintain donations over time, it becomes essential. So this is why Water Aid organised their bathroom sessions. I don't know if you saw them. I watched a few and they were pretty good. In cooperation with Clash magazine, celebrities such as Mel C and Pixie Lott, they were live streamed singing in their bathrooms, right? So keeping the water message. The Blue Auction was another one. That was an online auction organised by Bonhams, where they donated artworks, and they were auctioned online to the highest bidder, and all proceeds there were going to NHS charities. And we've also seen a number of sporting events digitised. You might have seen that Premier League footballers were playing each other on EA Sports FIFA Football Online. But another standout for me was the European Tour Simulator event. And that was a series of indoor golf tournaments where a group of top players competed against each other online using Trackman simulators. And I think this is a really interesting one as well, because donation channels are changing. So unless you're a geek like me, and I am, trust me, you may not be aware of the gaming culture. You don't see it much on TV, but everyone who is involved is aware of the vast popularity of a number of gamers, and that's to a massive audience. And to put it in context, in the UK, the gaming industry now accounts for more than half of the UK's entire entertainment market, right? And it's worth nearly £4 billion, and that's more than the video and music industry combined. So perhaps it's not surprising that these new stars want to contribute back to society through actively working for charities. And you probably haven't heard, but stars such as Ninja and Lachlan, they've raised over $150,000 between them in a single charitable competition playing Fortnite. So that might seem unattainable, but the technologies to enable these events and to stream and to create donation channels, in fact, these are widely available. In fact, my kids have got Twitch set up. So for anybody of any size, this is potentially one of the easiest ways to create an online event. Other examples in this space are Steam networking. So Steam is an online game platform. It has made a number of games available, and where all the proceeds for the downloads go to charity. And if you use Xbox, you can now donate your reward points, right? And then reward points are essentially online currency, and you can do that direct to the charities listed on their platform. I also wanted to mention Bonusly. I don't know if you've heard of Bonusly, but this is something we use at Acquia. And in general, it's a system of rewarding our colleagues when they help us out or do something great. And over time, what happens is that you collect your points and you cash them out, and you can do that for vouchers or online subscriptions. However, you can actually now donate to charities. And again, this is a virtual currency that has real world value. And I myself personally recently donated all of my Bonusly for a month to the Australian Fire Relief Fund set up by the Red Cross. And I'd say, again, don't think this is unobtainable. So Bonusly administrators, and these are typically human resource departments in companies, they have the ability to create their own charity threads. So this can be very much done at a local level as well. You just need to understand which companies are using Bonusly. So hopefully food for thought there. And the final mention is for something actually I just learned about very recently, Tuesday in fact, and it's something called Make It Donate. And this triggers charity donations from anything connected to the internet. So for example, you can donate as you walk with an activity tracker, right? So your Fitbits. You can donate when you shop with an online bank, or you can donate when people tweet using a certain hashtag, right? So any kind of event can trigger a donation. It's a new one on me, I have to admit, and I only learned about it recently. But if you haven't heard of it before, I think it's worth checking out. So the link to find them is in the bottom left-hand side of this slide, and you'll be able to access that from the PDF at the end. Right, hopefully you saw a lot of positives there, and hopefully great ideas. But is this a short-term thing, or are we in it for the long haul? So these are a random set of articles, and I picked them after searching for COVID-19 new normal. And the point I wanted to briefly make here is that despite the range of opinions out there, and there are many, there is no real clarity as to what comes next, either in the short or the long term. With this in mind, what safe assumptions can we make? Now, I'm going to say as a disclaimer, these are my opinions only, so please make your own decisions. That said, I'm not sure there's anything groundbreaking here. I think it stands to reason that however we return to normal, it will be a slow process. And that could be hindered at any time by a second wave of outbreaks. So the old quote, hope for the best, plan for the worst, prevails. It's likely that a reduction in travel and socializing is foreseeable in the near future. And I think mass gatherings will have a very slow return. And this is going to have a knock-on effect for those organisations relying on public attendance. And let's say, as an example, the National Trust, or any local attractions or museums, as an example, relying on local government funding, because the local government funding is also going to see restrictions over the next year. And I think that's true if you've been reading the news recently. And we've also seen changes in consumer behaviour. So what does it mean for household budgets, with a focus on the essential over the desired and economic uncertainty? What comes next in terms of donations? So all these things combined should suggest that where we cannot reliably predict our future, there is one element that's going to be consistent going forward, and that's going to be digital. So each of you is somewhere on the digital maturity curve. Where we are now has shown us the criticality of embedding digital into your organization, right? Digital should be your backbone. It should lead how you engage, how you facilitate, and how you provide services. Essentially, it should help you run your charity. Right, so we're kind of moving on to the topic in hand now. Before we consider outreach, we should really understand what makes a great digital experience. And, you know, I'm learning all the time, so any input from you guys is welcome here. But I feel that, you know, you need to consider that while each person feels they are unique, the chances are they fit into a grouping or some kind of segmentation. And this is going to allow you to talk to them in a way they understand and appreciate. So think of 4 or 5 personas of whom you believe your donor is, what they do for a living, what their income is, and what they look for when making donation decisions. Look for certain traits within your core donors compared to your charity's mission. And once you understand the donor, you can begin to communicate over time. Many digital consumers do their research, right? So they're going to be looking for good reasons from different sources before they commit. And if you can strike the balance of personalized conversations over time, then the next logical step of donating becomes a seamless experience. So if you combine all these things, it's a great way to get to know your prospects rather than hunting down new ones based purely on sort of generic data such as demographics or spending power. One thing I'll kind of caution everybody on, as I did last time, is be aware that you can go too far down the rabbit hole. The temptation with personalized experiences is that you can be all things to all people. So for example, you could change your message based on geolocation, by browser type, by the originating channel, by the time of year or day, or by any number of factors. So be clear on your segmentations and deliver simple content and simple messaging that will appeal. And never forget that you are one more digital experience a millennial has on a day-to-day basis. But that said, don't become clickbait. Finally, never forget the basics of running your charity. Creating a world-class digital experience strategy won't help you if you don't have a reliable, great website, great customer service, and easy-to-use e-commerce options. So while the ethos is completely different, commercial companies have a laser focus on customer experience within their digital portfolio. They understand that reducing the number of clicks and ease of interaction is of vital success to them. So those of you who saw my previous webinar will recognize these, but they're still great statistics to keep an eye on. And it's the global internet usage reports across devices and channels, and they break down in a number of ways. But we can see here that of all social media users, 66% of them are aged under 35 years old. And they're spending over 8 hours a day accessing the internet, of which close to half on average is via social media accounts. So as you probably know, this is the new audience everyone is trying to engage with across many different channels. And as we've seen with Snapchat and Vine, each are trying to be relevant and retain their user base. Yeah, I'm going to cover millennials again, right, because they do seem to get a bad rap, especially in the press. But the truth is that this demographic is highly engaged in the charity sector, and they're willing to support charities either financially or through their own time. So it's important to reach out in the right way. Excuse me. So these numbers show that if you reach out to millennials with absolute transparency, with a personalized message, and can show how their money has been spent, then retention will be high. And there is a significant chance their friends will get involved also. And be aware that there's different social channels, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, attract different demographics. Facebook and LinkedIn's core millennials will tend to be older. Instagram and Twitter are popular across all age groups. And if you're looking to target students, Facebook and Instagram should be your primary channels. Younger professionals, then you're looking at LinkedIn and Twitter. So GA, Google Analytics, it's a great resource for finding out these general trends and giving basic segmentations based on websites visits. But we're going to take a look at how you can get more granular data for each individual user. And of course, I'm not the only one saying this. There are a number of industry stats that are out there that tell us our donors are looking for a meaningful experience over time. So let's take a deeper look at how we can achieve this. So our focus today is outreach. I'm assuming that you guys have come up with some kind of innovative way of fundraising or offering your services online. And you're going to need to promote this in the most effective way possible. Ideally, your marketing automation tool has the ability to create segments and to personalize. It's also going to have features such as website tracking, landing pages, pop-up focus items, and personalized content, and also the ability to outreach not only through email, but through SMS and social media. Now, if you don't have all these things, don't worry. With careful thought and effort, this could be done manually in some areas. But if you are interested in a low-cost option that has all of these features, just email me directly after the webinar. So as with all things, fail to plan, plan to fail. Deciding on your strategy is going to be key. And you've got to keep in mind the thoughts from the previous slides. You can be ambitious, but you've got to keep it simple. So do you know who your donors are? This is everything we previously discussed. Do you know what their favorite social channel is? What's their geolocation? How many times have they engaged with you? What content do they repeatedly come back to? And then when you A/B test, which permutations work? So based on this data, you can start to think about where they are in their journey with you. So which articles have brought them to the website? Do they repeatedly come back without looking to donate? Or is it just information they're after? Have they taken themselves to the point of donation, but then not done so? Or are they looking for opportunities to give up their time, but haven't taken the first step? If you can understand who a donor is and where they are in their journey, you can start to consider which strategies will help them take the next best step. So consider a prospect who feels they want to give their personal time to your charity. They repeatedly view the content that describes how and when they can do so, but they won't take the next step for some reason. So maybe you can engage them by offering a personalized newsletter as the next stage in that particular funnel. So this is where email becomes interesting. As a voluntary engagement offers an opportunity to showcase how others are giving up their time, the good that it does for the wider community, and the ease at which they can do it, as well all the social elements being involved, all these things can be offered to the prospect as great reasons for taking the next step. Also consider how you will evaluate the success of each and every one of the campaigns that you create. So initially, it may be to monitor each click-through for each piece of personalized content, but ultimately you're going to need goals, right? Goals such as donor volunteered time or donor shared content to measure your success over these journeys over time. And this is how we at Acquia talk about the process with our customers. It's about taking those anonymous unknown donors beyond the Google Analytics general information into granular individual unknown users. So you should be thinking in terms of being able to deliver very specific content to each segmentation of the anonymous donor. And you'll be able to do this in real time based on how the anonymous donor is interacting with the website. Finally, when the donor has traveled down the funnel and engagement is reached, you can capture a piece of data such as an email address or a social handle and integrate with your CRM data. So this takes you up to the next level of understanding who your donor base are, what they prefer, and how they engage, and ultimately, how best to talk to them. As already discussed, our primary focus for today is outreach and the personalized promotion of your activities. However, it's difficult to understand and segment your supporters without having some analysis of their interaction with you. So that's where we start. We start with inbound activities first. Then we're going to focus in on how we can make use of the data collected and then optimize our outbound communications. And finally, we can examine a little bit how segmented data can potentially reduce your Google ad spend. So the first step is to optimize your outreach is to start to understand your donors at that anonymous level, as we discussed. This means being able to track each user as they interact with your website. So for me, the best approach here is to use a marketing automation tool that has the ability to track usage of your website. And that's typically a small JavaScript insert that tracks through a unique ID and cookies. So that way you can collect the data inbound, but it's stored and organized in your outbound marketing automation solution. I've seen some sites starting to use the Google ID as a means to do this. And you know what, it's a great way of tying all your Google tracking data down to that granular level. However, when presented to the user, it looks like a formal kind of login process. And now personally, I find that off-putting, and I think that's overkill for what you're trying to achieve. So the best approach still is to use cookies. And since GDPR, people have a tendency to just accept the content policy when interacting with the website, because it pops up literally on every website. So it's become a bit of an annoyance, but it's still the best way we feel of clearly laying out your intentions to the donor and really explaining why this is beneficial for both parties. And any of those who are privacy motivated, it's a great way of showing your honest intentions. Also, and you know what, if someone doesn't want to be tracked, you're going to know right there and right then. But once you have gained consent, you are able then to track the donor's interactions over time. And again, it's important to stress that this is down to the individual user level. As donors interact, you'll begin to formulate how each user gravitates to certain content and where you see them fitting in with your geo-demographics, your segmentations. So from here, this data is ultimately going to help you build your donor segmentations ready for personalization. Of primary importance, of course, is the capture of some form of identification, like an email address, a phone number, or a social handle. So without this, there will be no outbound communication. So this is where we start to think about personalization, right? So this is where you would consider using things like focus items. So focus items are pop-ups. They're the ones that pop up when you scroll down a web page, or dedicated personalized content pieces. And you target both of these at the donor segment, right? So you're talking to them in the right way. And by doing so, you're creating calls to action. And these are designed to convince the donor in a very personalized way to subscribe to your communication channels. And as I've mentioned several times, if you are using a marketing automation tool that has all these features, you're creating a single view of the donor across both your inbound and outbound communications. Now, hopefully, well, I'm pretty sure that you all see the importance of that. But if nothing else, it makes life so much easier when handling customer data. Right, awesome. So we've created our understood anonymous users, and we've created our segments, and we have used different personalized call to action techniques to convert to a known user through the sharing of some unique ID that we discussed previously. So through this engagement, we have created the beginnings of a relationship. At this stage, these guys are not yet donors, but they're prospects. So how do we then qualify our new leads and push them down a funnel to conversion? So to for marketeers, sorry, this is not rocket science. However, it does consider some thought as to what the social, geographic, demographic profile of this particular persona is. What are they interested in? What do other people in this persona do and like? Funnel progression becomes interesting when you think in terms of personas. There is no one size fits all anymore. So we can see here a potential journey from prospect to donor, from unknown prospect through to understood donor. After the initial anonymous visits and the conversion, we can build a campaign for this segment and email them directly with a call to action. We can see if the user is open and click through the email, and we can also see if they hit the landing page, which is also personalized. So let's assume at this stage that the user does not engage. We can then start running A/B versions of the same campaign. Maybe this time we'll tweet it out, and the user engages as this is their primary social medium. So through an inbound unique URL, you use UTM codes, urchin codes embedded in the tweet to push them back to a personalized landing page. And because we are able to engage with the user across multiple channels, and we have a single view of their history with you, we're building out a two-way conversation. So potentially we could challenge the user at this stage of the funnel, right? So we could ask relevant questions through a form and capture the responses. The idea then is to remove any inhibitions they may have around donation. And potentially here, we have a much better chance of that if the conversation is relevant to the donor. So these are just ideas, and how you build your funnel, of course, is up to you. But hopefully I'm describing methods that increase your chances of success through a simple two-way interaction that is visible across all of your outbound channels. And this is where your creative brains come in. I think the key takeaway here is over time, you are capturing many data points across different segments. By capturing and analyzing what works and perhaps more importantly, what doesn't, you create a very clear picture of how to engage with your donors. And in the long run, this personalized approach is going to increase donations. So the next tactic depends on how you are currently managing your digital ad spend. So before I get into it though, first of all, I wanted to call out the Google ad grants. If you guys were not aware, this program is for registered charities, including the UK, and it provides approximately £8,000 worth of Google ads every month, and that's for free. Now, there are criteria for joining, but if you have not done so already, I strongly recommend you take a look-see and see if your organisation qualifies for this grant. Also, if you haven't seen it, I'd also recommend watching the Charity Digital webinar on decoding the Google grant. You can see the link on the bottom right-hand side of the slide here. And again, you will be able to click through with the PDF version of this presentation. So when I talk of digital ad spend, of course, I'm referring to all the social channels, but I'm going to focus in on Google Ads just for today, because we know that Google Ads are paid advertisements that appear in search results on google.com, and they do that with the use of Google AdWords or advertisements that appear on different websites through their display network, and of course Google's AdSense program. And we also know that Google Ads can be an extremely effective way of driving relevant, qualified traffic to your website exactly when people are searching for the organization's mission, looking around how they can donate. So Google audience targeting, that allows you to reach people based on who they are and their interests and habits. And that can boost your campaign's performance by reaching people browsing websites, using apps or watching videos. And also customer match, that lets you use your online and offline data to reach and re-engage and remarket with your customers across search, shopping, Gmail, YouTube, everything else, Google Display as well. But both of them use information that your customers have shared with you, and both target ads to those customers and other customers like them. And these are useful advertising tools, from increasing brand awareness to driving conversions. And don't mean to sort of like teach you guys to suck eggs, because you probably know this, but if Google already does this, why is this relevant here, right? Well, by creating your segmentations, you can send very, very specific segmented audience data to Google. And you do this for customer match, ad campaigns, and lookalike affinity acquisition. And this next level allows you to create very, very targeted campaigns in Google. And this in turn optimizes your affinities with donors. It creates a much more specific message. And in theory, it reduces your spend to only those donors that match the message. And so I'm going to summarize, but I don't want to sound repetitive. But what's the impact here, right? So by tracking inbound user interactions on your website, you gain a deep understanding of each donor. You provide personalized messaging to convert them and capture that unique identifier. And that allows us to automate the outbound process. And then with this segmented data, we can deliver relevant outbound messages to each donor across the channel they prefer. And then we can drive inbound activity that can be measured and ranked over time. And we can also use the same data segments to optimize our use of digital advertising by creating micro-targeted campaigns for increased engagement and reduced ad spend. Next slide, please, mate. So this is everything we've discussed today, but it's been displayed as a journey over multiple funnels. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It's a takeaway for you because I will be repetitive then. However, it does allow me to discuss the next consideration. Once we have moved past our lead, nurture, and conversion stages, what should we think about in terms of retaining donors? So if you understand that new donors only have a retention rate of just 25%, and for engaged donors, it's 60% or 59%. You can see that by creating a trusted relationship with the donor over time, particularly by delivering content that's personalized and relevant, it's very important, right? So let's talk about the ongoing journey. Next slide, please. So the journey doesn't end. We know first-time donor retention is low, and even those existing donors, there's still retention challenges there. So if we are able to use digital experiences to increase our donors based on relevant, engaging content, how then, knowing the expense of doing that, how then can we ensure that we retain them? So you've probably heard of the Harvard Business School concept of customer delight. Essentially, it describes giving your donors such great service, either digitally or manually, or both, that they become champions or fans for your cause. So if we truly understand our donors and their behaviors, what can we do to ensure they become fans? What did we hear earlier when we discussed millennials, right? They want to be in the loop. So now that we're able to have these two-way conversations and capture the responses to these conversations in a single data source, can we start doing things like testing A/B responses? And also remember that millennials, they would donate if they could get feedback on their donation. So this then becomes a standard week-to-week or month-to-month conversation with the donor. And you can measure and evaluate your impact on that donor. So what I mean is, have they then become an advocate for your cause? And this is what fans are. But they don't just turn up and start flying the flag for you. You've got to put the effort in. If you justify the donor's donation as good, and ensure they have seen and understood the impact their donation has had, and also show maybe similar cases, and keep that constant feedback loop in progress across all the channels that the user prefers. Well, if you can do all of this, you will have fans. Next slide, please. So I hope, if I've done my job today, that I've described each of these recommendations in my analysis. Connect the dots, right? A system that delivers omni-channel content. Be quick, right? The fundamentals have got to be in place to deliver a great service. Be useful, deliver personalized content designed to be relevant. And be there, right? Understand your donors and be in a position to anticipate their needs and engage over time. Next slide, please. So the next slide is Acquia's take on exactly the same thing. And again, we had this last time. We're not going to go through each one, but it's a takeaway for you to read later. But if you are thinking of engaging on a personalisation strategy and really wish to deliver meaningful experiences to your donors, ask yourself each of these questions and then draw up a high-level impact assessment to justify your investment. And if you're not sure of any of these, please feel free to contact me using the details given at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. Right then, so a couple of more items unrelated to finish on, but these are based on a conversation I had with somebody in the charity sector, works for a large charity, and she felt these would be important points to raise right now. So I've told this story before, again, last webinar, but last year I visited a famous museum in London, right? And in the entrance, there's a large perspex box where visitors are encouraged to donate cash towards the upkeep of the museum. But the box was only a quarter full. So why was this, right? Is it the fact that people are meaner these days? No, I don't think so. I think the reality is that no one at the museum was really thinking about cashless society. And, you know, people will happily donate a few pounds for their visit if they could potentially swipe their phone to do so, right? And the Church of England have reflected this as well, right? So they're virtually cashless, and they're making it much, much easier for church congregations to pay in a contactless way. So this is an opportunity, and we can all do it online. You know, for example, extending your CMS capabilities with an e-commerce API framework to accept payments. But it's definitely a point to consider right now, because I guarantee you, we've all got something in common, right? We're all queuing at the shops. Excuse me, I had to take a drink. So when was the last time any of you used cash at the till? Probably not, right? So sure, the current situation dictates this, but it highlights that if you can no longer be dependent on cash going forward, your digital donation strategy is going to be essential. Next slide, please. Again, also worth re-emphasizing, social is where everybody hangs out, right? Channels may change over time. Don't know what the next one was going to be, so you've got to be nimble. But if you aren't engaged on social, you're missing out. Of those of you who think you're doing a great job, remember only 50% of you are using LinkedIn and Instagram as channels, right? So you could do better there. And these are great opportunities to drive prospects to your website and begin personalizing their experience. Next slide, please. So finally, a short reminder that we are now mostly dependent on digital initiatives to drive fundraising. And we can see that a major percentage of advertising spent is there directly to raise funds. Therefore, it's vitally important to get the message right. So based on your new understanding of your donor segments, you can drive that personalized advertising campaign that supports your digital experience and close the loop again by driving activity back to your website using things like urchin codes. So another way to think about this is to use personalization to augment your ad spend. So, you know, with ad blocking technology and declining click-through rates, ensuring that personalized content reaches the right places could prove vital in the long run. Next slide, please. Okay, so many thanks everybody for participating in today's webinar. I hope it's been informative, and I also hope I've given you some inspiration on your digital fundraising and services. But I also hope it's given you something to think about when organising outreach to your donors and prospects. You know, email blasts and generic messaging, they're no longer effective. And you've also got to take into account that the journey never ends. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to answer some questions. I'm going to turn my video camera on. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, just getting myself situated here. I'm going to do multiple things at the same time. Who'd have thought that? Thanks very much, Nigel, though. That was great. Echoed a lot of the same sentiments that we've been putting forward here at Charity Digital. Certainly from the include your users point of view, I think that is integral. The more we see user generating content and things like that playing a bigger role in the space, the more important it is than ever to include them in your journey. I always tell a story that probably a lot of people are bored to death with now about blood.co.uk. Obviously a slightly different type of donation, but in the same vein, they have just a great journey where they're in touch with you beforehand. You go, it's a great sort of experience while you're there, and then they follow up with you via text about where your blood's essentially gone and what it's been used for and all that sort of stuff. And it's just a great little loop, and then they push you back into the funnel to book your next appointment. I think there's a lot can be learned from something like that. So yeah, great stuff. Thanks very much again. So questions wise, let's start at the very beginning. Question from Miriam. I run a day centre for the elderly, so their families generally only donate when the member dies. How do we engage more support from the families?
Yeah, interesting question. So, okay, it's going to depend on the size of the audience, but I guess this is more of a kind of a charity strategy question, right? So the work that you're doing is obviously fantastic. How often are you engaged with these guys? Are you able to get any kind of information from them? So rather than just talking to them physically when they're there at the time, at the event, do they give you any email addresses, SMS? So do they give you a phone number, anything like that? If you can get that kind of information from them, then you can start your digital campaign from there. Now, I've got to be honest with you, because the question is kind of quite broad. I don't know if that helps or if you have that information, but if you do, then start thinking in terms of these kind of events affect people, and I think if you can get the message right, you can give them reasons to think about donating over a longer period of time, right? Not just that one time, because they'll take away the impact of what's happened and they'll understand the good work that you're doing. And if you can keep in touch with them and talk about, we talked about those journeys, and it doesn't need to be a complicated one. I think the NHS blood story that you gave, Chris, was a good one. If you can keep in touch with them over time, encourage them that this is affecting other people as well, then potentially you can start to create that engagement. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thanks, Nigel. I want to sort of lean on some experience I have as a donor to Marie Curie as well. Obviously, I'm not too sure on the size of your sort of daycare centre, Miriam, but Marie Curie do a lot of great things that keep me visiting back, especially if I've had family who've unfortunately sadly passed away from there in the past. And being able to go back and read sort of memory books, they constantly engage with you through different pieces of content. They have a chapel on site where we can go back and visit and chat to the staff. They also do regular sort of family involvement days with people who are staying there as well. So there's a whole host of ideas you could use from both a service user point of view and a donor point of view, because I think there's quite a distinct overlap there, which not necessarily is transferable to a lot of different charities. So it's kind of marrying the two together and then figuring out how to best use use them as part of the story as well. So I mentioned UGC earlier, user generated content. So how can get them to tell the story from their point of view? We connect better with emotional stories from source. So maybe a few ideas, some cool video content you can play within the hospice, some stuff like that. I think best advice there is be brave, be bold, and just try and test a few things to Nigel's point earlier, so the A/B testing side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a delicate. So, I mean, you made some really good points there, because it's a delicate subject, right? Let's not be let's beat around the bush. And I think, you know, for everybody on this call, that they've all got to essentially ask for a donation in some way, because it's the lifeblood of what you do. But don't be afraid to show your good work, right? I think people forget easily. You know, something happens, they're affected for a while, and move on. So that kind of constant reminder is a good thing, because you're showing, you know, what you're doing over the long term.
Yeah, Miriam actually had a follow-up question about age demographic, and I think, to my point, that just kind of shown you could have quite a wide age demographic. I mean, family could fall anywhere. You mentioned 65 plus, but, you know, family can affect anyone from sort of, you know, my first interaction with Marie Curie, I was sort of 16, 17, and I followed them all the way right through. And I'll not tell you how old I am now, but it's kind of, it sticks with them. So it's sort of any age, and I think there's no sort of boundaries there, essentially. I think it's more.
Are you aware of any demographics for channels? Because you know, I'm no spring chicken. My mum and dad are in their 70s, but I know that they use Facebook, right? And they use Facebook messaging, so that's one sort of medium. And they still respond to texts on their phone. WhatsApp, I think you can't actually integrate with WhatsApp as it stands right now, but you can manually. So potentially WhatsApp groups are an interesting medium as well. So, you know, food for thought there, perhaps, Miriam, in terms of how you communicate and what channels are best.
Great point. Yeah, thanks, Nigel. We have gone past the 2 o'clock barrier, but we will power through. We're going to try and answer as much of these as possible before we'll have to let Nigel go. So next question from Nathan. Is there any good training for Google Analytics out there? I'd like to refresh my knowledge a bit.
Yeah, there's absolute loads, and all you need to do is to basically put those terms into Google, and you'll get lots and lots of hits back. Do I have any that I recommend? I'm not sure that I do. I could potentially dig some out through some of our DX guys, because they use it a lot. But also there's a bunch of paid stuff as well, which is fairly cheap. And if you haven't checked out the online academies, so I use Udemy, if you can, so UDEMY. But you know, you can get really serious training courses for about £10, and they're video based, right? So they're nice and easy to consume. So I definitely recommend taking a look at some of those.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I always sort of head over to, like, Google itself tends to have good how-to guides. YouTube will always have some stuff on there before I tend to look into the courses as well. But I know Udemy, they're good stuff. They do some really good stuff. But yeah, it's a tough one. It's always changing. There's always something new on there to learn about. So it's always worthwhile giving yourself a little
moving thing.
Next question from Dawn. Do you have any recommendations for CRM databases to help track segment progression?
Well, it depends on your budget. All right. I mean, if you're going to go enterprise software, then, you know, everybody uses Salesforce.com. I find, and it's very sales oriented, I have to say, but it gives you all of the CRM basics, and it's got some very reasonably priced options. Is Pipedrive, and I use it as part of my demonstrations. I don't know if you would agree with that, Chris. I'm
not that familiar with Pipedrive, actually.
Okay.
But there's plenty out there. I mean, we've got a good article on our site that evaluates them all.
Yeah.
So we can pop that over to you afterwards.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have a read of that as well, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. The more
£15 a month as its basic starter package.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not too bad. Next question from Maggie. Can you recommend a low-cost market automation tool?
Oh, I can.
I thought you might.
Yeah. Well, the thing about marketing automation is, right, it's saturated. There's loads of different options out there, and you think about MailChimp and all those guys. You know, I talked about the combination of inbound and outbound. I think that's vitally important to get your heads around. All we're really talking about here is a JavaScript snippet that is tracking the individual users that interact with the websites. And from there, you can do all that fun stuff what we described, so all those pop-ups and personalized pieces of content. And the fact that it's sitting in your outbound tool gives you everything you need, all the information that you need. And then from there, you can create your campaigns. So, I mean, I'm not going to sell Acquia here, but if you want to sort of find out about our products, please just email me directly, and I'll give you a link. We have a very sort of easy to use, intuitive, lots of drag and drop, outbound marketing automation tool, which is open source, right? So it's free. And you can use that open source version for free yourself if you host it yourself. But obviously on top of that, we've got options where we host as well. But I would say definitely look for the inbound data collection and personalization tools. They're vital in this modern age. That can then drive all of your outbound activities, and look for more than just email, right? Look for social, look for SMS, and look for a tool that's flexible. So if you're thinking in a more complex way, look for a tool that can integrate with different CRMs, different platforms as well.
Magic, thanks very much for that. Next question. After the inbound engagement where you make a user profile, how do you then reach out on social media? Is this through advertised posts or directly messaging the individual? Yeah,
good point, Matt. So think about what Hootsuite does. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Hootsuite, but it's a broadcast tool for social media. You create one post, share it across many platforms, but it's your channel posting to everybody, right, on your feed. The way our tool works, as an example, is because you've captured that granular for Twitter, you can actually do a direct message to that individual user. So it's not on your channel, it's on theirs, and you're atting them. And that's the way it typically works. So it's almost like an SMS message is probably a good way of thinking about it. And it's probably most effective if Twitter is identified as the most used channel for that user.
So it's kind of like an automated tweet, essentially.
Pretty much.
Directly to somebody.
Yeah, so it'll be at Chris, and then you'd see it because it was messaged to you, basically.
Cool. Awesome. Next question from Louise. She's coming from a beginner's point of view. How do you create a personalized landing page and link to that on social? Could we link a how-to article? Yes, we probably can, but I'll let Nigel answer the questions first.
So there are a bunch of landing tool creation pieces of software out there. I mean, again, I think that's fairly saturated. And I mean, I'll take a step back, right? So let's say that your budget was tight, and you wanted to try and recreate what we've described today in a sort of fairly simple way. You can do that if you look around for all of the individual elements, right? So there are outbound email tools out there. There are landing page creating tools out there. And just to answer that question directly, essentially you can look for a landing page tool, and it gives you a bunch of options, right? So they'll have a load of content that you can drag and drop in to create essentially what is a web page, a single web page. And then you just save that off and publish it. And then you've got to draw, some users to that page in some way. So you've got to drive some inbound communications. You do that via an email or a Twitter post or any kind of social post. And that's how you create landing pages. Of course, the optimal way of doing it again is to bring it all into one solution.
Yeah, it makes sense. We use it we used to be sort of segmented in that way from our landing pages. We used to use Unbounce, which was really useful for us, but we've since brought it all into one place, and it is much more beneficial from a target and segmentation point of view. Louise actually had a follow-up question to kind of, that might help set the scene. Actually, now I've just found it. They haven't yet built a supporter base of donors such fundraisers, so don't have a mailing list or e-newsletter yet.
Okay.
She asked, is it worth creating one before we have donors? I.e., is it a good way to create and build a support list, or at least a group of prospective supporters before they start trying to engage?
Yeah, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? It is. So let's make some assumptions. per Louise, right? So let's say that you have some following in some way on social, and let's use that as an example, right? So let's say you've got a couple of thousand followers. You can start being very active on social, and whatever campaign that you take, we talk about engagement. What does that really mean? You want feedback on your campaign, right? So you've got to encourage people to follow links. All right. So you can build your land page, and you can, whatever the message is, you can be very specific about that one thing. But yeah, put a form on it, right? Put a form on it that pops up. So when people are sort of interacting with your new message, that they're encouraged to give you a secondary piece of information.
Yeah, it sounds to me that there's almost two different journeys there. It's one to donate and one to fundraise, and I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't happen simultaneously and interweave at the same time as well. It's almost like, learn a little bit about, or you can make assumptions about your audience or who you want to target, right? You build those out into general personas. So, Jane Doe from such and such lives on here, will engage with us through that, and then you can sort of build a user journey based off of that, and then target them for specific bait donations, or target them with sign-up forms to your website to start building that sort of CRM of prospective donors. And then, as Nigel says, it's about learning, testing, getting feedback, iterating and changing as you go. I think the key thing is to not think you have to do one before the other. I think they can both happen at the same time. It's just taking the time to develop the right strategy and
keep it simple. Keep it simple.
Exactly.
Yeah,
great point. So the next question from an anonymous attendee has me completely stumped, and it might as well it might have you completely stumped as well. So it might be one we have to take away, but I'm going to ask it anyways. How do you use Google Ads if the country is not in the eligible country list, i.e. only 2 African countries are on the list? That is a fantastic question.
It is, and I think it's a kind of Google corporate question. I didn't know that there were only 2 African countries on that list, which I think is I think that's quite poor, actually, considering the size of Africa as a continent. So I would personally, as a former lobbyist, I would contact Google directly, and I would not only do that individually. If you're a charity that's part of a syndicate of other charities, I would get them to also contact them individually, and say, look, we're doing great work in these countries. Why can't we also have the ad spend grant for those countries as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's got me intrigued as well. I want to take a look at that once we go offline and see what I can find.
So I'm making an assumption here, just so I got the question or understood the question correctly. It's either a charity based in one of those countries, or it's a charity working in one of those countries that wants to, advertise there. Maybe
delivering services. I'd made the same one, but yeah, it's a very good question, very poignant. Something I'd like to check out, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Next question from Lucy. As a, in brackets, very part-time freelance marketing officer for a small medium charity, I'm always put off by the managing of Google Ads. The managing that Google Ads is required. Does it take a lot of managing or monitoring? Could it be something a volunteer trustee could take on?
I mean, I've done it for a friend, let's put it that way. And this is a rabbit hole question, right? This is how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Because I think, if you look at corporates, they invest a lot of time and money in this, because every single micro detail will cost them a lot of money in terms of ad spend. So weigh up that kind of micro attention with what you're trying to achieve. Basically, what I did for my friend's care home was to set her up with a budget based on the keywords I thought were most appropriate, and I set it and forgot it. And I just made sure that the budget wasn't being breached on a regular basis. And then I'd go back once a month and look at the analytics and see whether, what was being effective and what wasn't. And with that approach, she saw a lot more traffic going to her website, and she did get an uptick in physical visits based on people being pushed to her website. So that would be my recommendation, is just to kind of take a sensible approach and do what works best for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really strong piece of advice. It always depends on scale. We outsource a lot of ours, but I myself also have a very heavy involvement in it. From a sort of managerial perspective, always in checking and iterating and testing different assets out, that sort of thing. But you can make it as to Nigel's point, I think you can make it as simple or as complicated as you wish, but it's really based on what you're trying to achieve, essentially. But you can do a lot for a little, I think, in Google Ads, especially if you're quite niche. I don't know enough about the charity, but if you're quite niche and not a lot of highly searched keywords in that sense, you can bid quite on them and be quite successful. Great, thanks for that, Lucy. Next question from Natalie. How easy is it to manage good ads if you're a small team that never used them before? We've just answered that one, so I'll skip that one. Next question from Jane. We're just starting an individual support scheme. What continuous payment authorities do charities use? Credit cards, debit cards?
That's gonna vary. In fact, to be honest with you, mate, I think that sounds like a good title for your next webinar. Well, the thing about that slide, I mean, this was my friend in the charity pointing this out to me, and I think I didn't occur to me, but she's right. I mean, none of us have used cash for the last 2 months because we're not allowed to, because it's dirty. So yeah, e-payments, especially for smaller guys, what's the optimal solution there? I mean, I used to work in the payments industry, and I know that it's really varied. So it's potentially a good next webinar.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, keep that in mind. Always looking for new webinars.
Yeah. I can't answer the question today. I'm sorry.
Yeah, fine. We'll take it offline and come back to you in some form of content, I'm sure. Next question from Maria. If we are a non-profit that is just starting with fundraising, is it necessary to have a software, a donor management software? Is there a free software or free donor management they could use?
Donor management software that I'm not aware of. You'll be more aware of that than me, Chris.
Again, I'll point you back to the CRM article that we'll push out later. I would say it's pretty essential. I believe there are free services. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there is some free. I think Salesforce does have a free, but it is quite limited. But it often is the best just to get you started. Salesforce and non-profits, but don't hold me to that. I'll take a look. I'll dig that article back out, and we'll get that over to you, Maria, for you to help. Oh, someone's just Donify is free apparently, but I think it's all on that. That we have anyway, so we'll. Yeah,
there's been a few comments coming through from payments. That one was Stripe as well, so thank you for that.
That's it. Yeah, good one. Thanks for jogging the memory. Thanks everybody. And last question from Paul. With the emergence of VPNs, how does this does that impact harvesting user locations?
VPNs?
Yeah, because I'm not sure. I mean, I know VPN can mask locations, can't it? Could essentially.
It's a very specific use case, right? So typically, what you're talking about would be maybe a large corporate, right? So I'm working in, I don't know, HSBC headquarters, and I've got thousands of co-workers, but we're all coming in via the same IP address. Is that what I think that potentially could be it. So there's not a lot you can do about that, to be perfectly honest with you. The only solutions that I'm aware of is that a lot of these IP addresses are fairly well known. So you can actually identify whether it's coming from an organization or not. And in that vein, you would segment those individual users as some kind of employee and potentially that they might be different from each other. And then that will be proven out when you're giving them CTAs and trying to get that unique piece of information. And then with that in mind, you'll segment them in whichever way that you see fit. So hopefully that answers the question. I'm not sure I understood it 100%.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very niche question, but thanks for submitting. Thanks for trying the best to answer it. I'll take that away as well. Well, thank you, everybody. That is all we've got time for. Thanks very much, Nigel. Another awesome webinar to build off the back of your last one. Done your credibility no harm, that's for sure. Thanks everybody for joining us. Resources and recording will be sending out, and obviously the presentation will be sent out after the webinars. After we've concluded today, we usually send it out in the next week or so. So keep tight to your inboxes, and you'll see it there. We also send out a feedback form straight after this. So if you'd be so kind to fill that in, that would be greatly appreciated. We always look to sort of better what we're doing here from a webinar point of view. So be very kind and let us know how we got on. Coming up soon, we have next Tuesday is our next and final podcast in the COVID-19 series. That'll be on May 26th. We'll be answering your questions. So if you've been following us, we've been soliciting stories to share and questions from your organizations of how you can essentially be more digital. We'll be answering those in part 2 of our Answer Your Questions, which will nicely wrap us up as we look to move on in the new normal, as Nigel was calling it earlier. And the next webinar we have will be on June the 4th. We haven't got a title submitted for that just yet, but as Nigel said, he's just give us a few ideas. So sit tight, keep in touch with us, and we'll have that out to you soon so you can start signing up. Thank you all again. Enjoy the sunshine safely, and we'll see you very soon.
Yeah, have a great weekend, everybody.
Goodbye.